Welcome to the introduction of the Auto Asset Extraction tool. The tool itself can be found in the main processing toolbox. And what we'll be doing is basically searching for vertical assets within the point cloud and identifying them. So information is being assigned to the element or the asset or the feature that you're locating, and we'll be able to extract and assign within the same tool interface. For flat objects or small features, you'll have to resort to the original asset ID tool, which is more of a point and click method. Now for this tool, we have visible data. We've run the tool, and what it's going to do is it's going to identify or locate vertical objects. It's going to build a list for us so that we can go through that list and assign attributes to them. So right now I'm currently on number 10, and we are assigning this object as a yield sign, as well as assigning the attributes for that cell. Now the cell is being pulled from a cell library, so everything's going to be linked together. So the next time we place a yield sign down, it's going to use the correct cell. It's going to link the description and the assets or the attributes. We'll cover how to set one of these lists up, as well as how to import the cell library. But let's go ahead and see what this tool has done already. And before we get into the details here, so we've already placed a few signs down. Basically, we've accepted. And if I click on one of these and look at the information, we can see that we have tags. Now, we've tagged this element with the attributes over here. So we're going to have an attribute scheme, and we're going to be tagging those attributes as we go along. Once they're done being tagged and located, you'll then go into the export stage, and you'll either export as a shapefile or you'll export as a ASCII file or CSV. So all this information will follow this element. Now if we decided not to use the tagging, whether it's for break lines or spot shots or any other type of elements, we can always tag later on with the tag editor, and you can always assign this same information post extraction. That's where you'll also do your editing as well. So let's say we had made a mistake and we didn't catch it, but we caught it later on. We can edit right there and then with that tool. And before we move on, I'll go ahead and accept a few of these so you can see how this tool runs. So we'll go ahead and click accept. It's going to go to the next object that it found. It's going to sync our images. It's going to sync our top view. If we want to search, we can search for a specific cell. It's already been trained, so it's associating this object here with a yield sign, and it's picking the correct feature type or scheme type. And I'm just going to accept that, and it's going to go down my list. So here we have assign, accept, and so on. There's that pedestrian symbol again. Now when it comes to adjusting, you could just move everything within these previews, as well as the height. Don't worry about the diagonal. We're always just getting the true height here. If you wanted to modify the type, let's say post type was B, you would click in here. Let's say it's on the right side of the road, and it's going to pull the image in with it. So we're going to store the link of that image. You could either do relative or absolute. So these are minor little details. You could probably find most of these on the wiki. And so we're going to see how we set that up later. But we'll accept this. And again, it just moves down the line. If we get car noise or anything like that, you just go ahead and skip. If you get a wall, skip, and so on. Within the Options tab for this tool, we have the auto lookup cell, and this is going to be linked to the cell library that we have loaded at the time. At this point, the cell library should already be attached, but if not, you can go ahead and do a File, Attach Folder, and search for that folder within the class. Just go ahead and attach this folder here, so that now whenever we train the tool, it's going to learn and associate certain parameters such as height or trunk diameter with a specific cell, so that the next time we hit a stop sign, it will know that it needs to link it to the stop sign cell. The stored information is going to be located in the Topodot folder on your C drive under cells, and it's going to be this XML file. So if you train on one machine, you can take this file, put it in the same location, and use the same cell library, and you don't have to retrain it. Okay, so now that we have the cell library attached, we can go ahead and move on. In this section, we're going to be looking at the attribute schemes themselves. And I have a list here that are saved on my computer. What you're going to have is you're going to have this one available to you, but we have to place it in the right location so that Topodot can gain access to it. We're also going to look into how we would actually create one ourselves. Okay, so let's see where that XML file is. I provided one for you in the meta files here, and you're going to take this and you're going to copy it and paste it within the features folder. Again, this one's going to be the C drive Topodot GIS features, so you can see it's saved here. So copy, paste in here, or if we create one, they will all end up here. So let's go to the attribute scheme creator. Here we can select an existing one. So for example, we'll select the poles, and I can see that list just like this one. And if I open up one of these attribute categories, we can actually see the values associated with them. Let's look at another one. So this is the one that you're going to be working on. You're going to have all these available. So if we want to, we can add specific attributes to the end of this list. If we wanted to add a new value to a specific attribute, we can do so as well. It will just add it to the end of this. So if I hit new value, it'll open this up. Now anything that is changed or created, make sure you do save that, because if we do not save it and the tool is closed, we'll lose that information. Let's say we wanted to create our own, and we'll mimic this one right here. So we'll go add, and we're going to name this one, let's go poles 2. We're going to add the first attribute, we're going to want to specify a data type. In this case, it's just a word, so we'll do a string. So we're going to accept that. It's going to add it to the list. So this is kind of like a category. And actually, what you would have wanted to do is type in condition. Accept. And then under that condition, we're going to add the value. In this case, we'll just type in great. And let's do a poor as well. And we're just adding values at this point. A new value, we're going to do the x coordinate. So let's do and this is going to be a double precision number. And now let's add a value to it. So the value, or the name of this value, will be x, and we'll do %x for the actual value. And we can see if we hover over, there's other things that we could pull from. %x is one of them. Okay, so we're done duplicating this. Let's add in a few more things. So here we're going to add a counter. And it's going to start at 1. We're going to add an integer. And we're using values for this, so that I can select and it'll give me a number. And then for the counter, it'll start at 1 and it's going to count up for us. And once we're done, we're going to go ahead and hit save. And now that we've saved, we should see that that pulls number 2 XML in the features folder. Once it's in here and saved, we can restart the tool, and then we should have that list available. And again, as we locate objects, we can actually select, if we have two value options under one of the attributes, we can choose and control if we have those multiple options here. For this, it's just going to be stuck, and it's going to be pulling the Z or the X and the Y value. And then for the counter, it's just going to be counting. You can also see this list in the Asset ID tool. There we go. And let's say we just placed a cell down here and we were locating something. In this case, I just placed a point, but since it's an element, it's still being tagged. And there's the scheme at work. our count has gone up and everything else has been placed. Okay, so we know where our schemas are stored, and this is going to allow us to assign kind of an intensive GIS bits of information to elements. And if it's not necessary to tag or do anything too intensive, you can avoid the tagging and then just resort to the feature code export tool when you're ready to export. And if you don't choose that route, it's basically if you're just looking to do basic GIS stuff, and you're usually looking at the physical aspects of the cell itself. So just pulling the XYZ information, the cell description, and the feature code, and really nothing else beyond that. But if you need to do something along the lines of like an MUTCD code or the layout like so, we have to go the tagging route. So we will be tagging from here on out. So now let's take a look at some data preparation real quick, and then we'll move on to running the tool. So for the data preparation, let's look at the images first. We do have the auto picture synced to view 3, so that when we go to an object, it just automatically pulls from that list and gets the relevant image. Within our tuck sign attribute list here, we have the image being stored. So that's why we're going to want to have the images loaded. So go ahead and load the available image project that you can find in the class folder. That's going to be this file, or you can just import and use the RSP. All the images are stored within this scans folder. Now for the data, a couple of things. We want to load the data via a fence in the region of interest, so we can use a fence shape or center line. Basically, you could do, for the center line, you could do a fence along element and do like left and right 50 feet. Basically, you want to include just the data within your right of way. You don't want to go too far out off into the woods or something like that. We don't want sparse data. We want good coverage, and we want to look in the areas that would actually have our signs. Another thing is when we trim out these edges, it'll help us avoid a bunch of false positives. Okay. For visualization purposes only, we can unclassify all the data. So when we actually go to classify the data, if this feature is enabled, we'll be able to visually see everything that has been classified by simply just turning off the unclassified layer. And if you do have a lot of traffic noise or just some features that you don't want to include and they're always showing up on our list, you can go ahead and get rid of that now. If you have a nice straight highway, it will be easy to clean up the traffic noise. But for like delineators or construction barriers, you're gonna have to like fence those out and just leave them hidden or fenced out of the point cloud when we run this tool. So when it finds the objects, we're going to see that it uses a set of classification numbers per object, and it's going to colorize it. So for the signs, we're going to see the signs and the poles and the trees and whatnot. So I'll turn off the unclassified data, and then all these little specks of information are the objects. This technically isn't necessary to actually run the tool, but it's a good visual aid to kind of understand what's going on. And essentially those clusters of points are the objects that it has found. So we'll turn all that back on. And before we move on, just real quick, I'm going to recap on the auto lookup. So when this is enabled, it's going to train the prediction capabilities. So the more we train it, the more it'll be able to actually predict for us. So the predictions will eventually take over after the initial training. The density filter, basically if we leave this enabled, it's going to require 10 points per sampling versus 3 points. So if we have good dense data, we can leave this checked on and it's going to help us filter out false positives. If we have really sparse data, we might want to disable this. Okay, so once we have the cell library loaded, we have our feature type or scheme of attributes in the right location. We'll have our list here, and our data is prepared. We're ready to go and run the tool. So with the tool open and the data being shown here, we're going to go ahead and hit locate assets, and that's going to sit and search for all the vertical objects. Once it's done finding all the objects, it's going to throw it into the list for us, and we're going to go down that list and we're going to accept the objects that it has found, or we're going to modify and then accept. Okay, so it's done building the list here. Let's go ahead and shift this over so we can take a look at the image. Now if you use the same point cloud that I'm using and the images as well, you should see this as your first object in our list here. If not, that's okay. So it's found its first object, and it looks to be a light of some sort. So we're going to tag this element. We're going to choose a feature type of poles. You can also use the same attribute list here if you'd like. We're going to search, and you're going to search light, because we're going to have to do this at first to train it. Mine's already trained, so it already assumed that it was a light pole. But what you guys need to do is basically search for that light pole. Once it's set here, and then the feature type is the correct feature type, and we're ready to go, everything's selected. We don't have a lot of options in here because we only have one value per attribute. We'll just go ahead and accept, and it's going to go to the next attribute or the next asset in the list here, and again it's found the pole. Now yours may or may not know that it's a light already, so again go ahead and search if you need to, choose this cell, and then we're going to accept again. Now we've come across a sign. Well, I know it's not a pedestrian sign, so we're going to do a search, and we're going to pick stop, and then we're going to choose our stop sign. In this case, we just have a sign, and it's offset here, so we're going to fix it. If you're not recording the radius, it's not really necessary to fix the radius, just kind of center it properly. And if you're recording the height, again, you're going to change that too. So we are recording the height here. And let's say, for example, this image isn't the best image to use. Since we're recording the image from view 3, we can replace the image that's being shown right here with whatever image we'd like to use. So we can actually use load closest from point, or we can do the next best, or we can look at a list of closest imagery to pick out which one's best. Once you load that into view 3, you can then hit accept, and it will save that image. So again, you can fully modify this before we accept, and it will maintain all this information. Now, the more you train it, the predictions will have, you'll get the first one at the top, and then you'll get next best below the first available. So here I've already trained it on the pedestrian symbol. So if you don't have this one available to you, go ahead and search it. Here we have another sign. I'm just going to accept that. It's a generic sign. I'll go ahead and fix this one. Here we just have a wall, so there's really nothing there, so that's just a false positive. We'll skip it. Another pole. Here we have a yield sign, so now it's predicting for me. Now I'm not changing a lot over here, but if you do need to change something, you do want to change it every time you come across something, because we have a lot of stuff going on here. So this, for example, would be a user input. We're not going to know off the point cloud or the image whether it's a type A or B post, or whether or not it's in good condition or poor condition. For the height, we'll be, we're going to be pulling from this value anyways, so you don't necessarily have to change that. But for the available options here, we do. And go ahead and accept and skip as you go through. And once we're done, we're going to talk about how do we, edit or get this data out. Okay, so I've finished here. Let's see what it's done. It's placed all these cells for me. So in this case, I had my cell being placed, as well as the description. Let's take a look at one of these signs. We'll click on it. And then we can look at the tagged information here. Alright, so now that we know all of our vertical objects are located, we can then use the Asset ID tool to help us get the flat objects, such as the manholes and the utility covers. I'm not going to show that right now, but it's the same process, except you're using the original Asset ID tool. So let's see how we can modify these. So now we're going to look at how we're going to edit all of this tagged information, or just a few cells that we need to modify. So we're going to go to the tag editor. It can be found here. And these boxes over here are going to allow us to filter our search. We can either select elements within the design file and filter from there. So let's say we had selected everything in here and we want to filter by level, so I just want the roadway signs, and we're going to work with the roadway signs. We can modify those tag select elements. Another way to do it is, let's say we search. So we'll click search, and it's going to look for, in this case, everything, because we don't have anything filtered out. So I want to look for things that are tagged, so we'll search there. So now my results have been narrowed down a little bit more. Let's say we want to do it by level. You could choose your level and lock it in there. Or let's say I want to modify all yield signs. They fall under the same level as the other signs, so let's go ahead and do this. So we'll select this. We'll look at the line weight. Maybe it has a different color or something like that, but we're going to go with 4 here. So we're going to choose 4. We're going to search again, and now our list is a lot smaller. So in this case, it shares the same as the stop signs as well as the yield signs. So if I skip through, it looks like we have 2 stop signs in here. That's fine. So we're going to take this one and the remaining yield signs, and we're going to change the post type. Let's change it to, while we have them selected, so when we select them in here, it also selects them out in the design file. We're going to select, let's do E type, and we'll say, yeah, for now that's the only thing we'll change. We'll change it to this post type. So we're going to tag these selected elements. Once I click it, I can now check those, so I can look inside the information of this element, and we should see a type E sign now. And then before, the stop sign had a C type or an A type or anything else. So this is how you would modify. Now if you wanted to modify one thing at a time, that's perfectly fine too. You could just come through the list and change each one one at a time, or you can just simply click from this top view, so we can not use this searching ability. Let's just select our tree, and let's say we wanted to change it to, I don't know, an oak tree, and we want to say that it's a medium size or maybe a large size. So we'll tag that selected element, and now let's look at this information. So it's an oak now, and it's a larger size. Alright, so far we've only been working on assets and cells. Let's say we wanted to include break lines or spot shots or something like that. Well, it's just as easy to do it in here, so we'll be adding and editing breaks and other elements only within here, not the asset ID tool. You could search by level, so let's say we wanted to include all of our backup curbs, and we wanted to assign some attributes to them first. Well, we could do it this way. You'll search. I don't have any backup curbs in here, but then we'd select all of our backup curbs and assign a specific attribute. Same with the spot shots, or anything else outside of the asset ID tool, whatever you extract. So once you're done assigning attributes or tagging elements with attributes, we're ready to now export this information. And there's going to be 2 options. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now that we're ready to export, we're going to have 2 options. The first option is going to be a shapefile export, and then the second option is going to be a SRE export, which will allow us to choose a CSV format. Okay, so the first option basically does a direct export of all the current tagged elements within the design file. So, and this is going to create a set of shapefiles for each schema type. So if we have 2 types of schemas, let's say we have a polls one and a signs one, we're going to get 3 files apiece. So we're going to result with 6 files total. For the SRE, or the shapefile export, this is going to export based off of a selection and by a schema type export. And this is going to allow us to use or produce a CSV rather than a shapefile. For the CSV route, just make sure there's no empty fields within our attribute list, or else this will cause a column shift over, so we don't want to leave any blank fields. Okay, so let's do the easy one first, which will be our first option, and that's just going to export all the tags into a shapefile. So we're going to click it. We're going to name the beginning of our file names. So we'll just do this one as a tuck test. And we're saving that into our project folder here. It's going to run through. Once it's done, let's go ahead and take a look at what it's produced. All right, so we have 9 files total. We can see that we named the first portion of our file name, and then the second portion is going to be our schema type. So in this case, I have a poles, trees, and the tuck schema type. Let's go ahead and take a look at the other option. So we're going to go to the shapefile export. We're going to select the correct schema. And let's say we just want to export all the road signs right now. We can either choose them from our drop-down list, or we can select them within our design file and click Extract Selected Elements. Let's make sure that we choose CSV file for our options. The Auto tab is basically for linking certain levels to a certain feature type, so that it will go through. You can basically build the links, and it will go through and automatically connect the level type to the feature type. All right, going back to the main tab, we're going to extract the roadway signs only. We have the correct feature type selected. We haven't modified anything in here. We just want to extract as is. And then we'll go ahead and click Extract Level. Okay, so that's done now. You'll basically have a CSV file next to the DGN, and it's going to be named with the corresponding feature type or schema type. Once you open that, you'll see all the corresponding attribute information. Going back in here, if we decided we just wanted a shapefile, you can also do it from here as well, and also narrow down what you want to export.